What's up, Otakuans? Welcome back to another episode of the Manga Corner. We are hopping right back into a Rising of the Shield Hero volume review with the third volume. The third volume of the series will cover episodes 9 to episode 13 of the anime and has the most adaptation differences so far, and we're going to get into all of them. Leave us a like based off of trust, and if by the end of the video you are satisfied, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can continue to impress all your otaku buddies with how up to date and in the know you are. So let's resume this story of legendary heroes and waves of destruction with The Rising of the Shield Hero, Volume 3. Prologue. The prologue of this novel starts off the same way episode 9 does in anime. Our young heroes have seemingly been asked to take care of the monster slaying job outside of the village they had just defeated the zombie dragon for. During their short skirmish, Naofumi could tell that Raphtalia was moving slower than normal, and it's most likely due to the curse he had inflicted upon her. He wanted to make her treatment the number one priority, so he somewhat curses himself for being too nice in taking on this job. On their way back, they came across a young girl with blue hair named Malty in a field with 3 Philolios. The only noticeable thing left out of this encounter is a moment Naofumi reviews his party's current stats. Naofumi level 38, Raphtalia level 40, and Philo level 40. He notices their stars next to their levels and wonders what that means, but decides to look at it again later. Also, we leave out where the village chief gives Naofumi a bag full of money for thanks, but Naofumi proceeds to take half out and give the rest to the doctor in the village, unlike in the anime where it shows him instead telling the villagers they better have his money when he returns. This chapter closes out with the group plus one heading out via carriage and Naofumi becoming lost in thought about expenses for equipment to get stronger for the upcoming wave, but also expenses for the holy water needed for Raphtalia's treatment. Malty does ask about Raphtalia's injuries, but the two lie about dangerous monsters hurting them and she seemingly believes them. Then Philo takes off at neck-breaking speeds, possibly to impress their new passenger, and Naofumi begins to regret accepting Malty's request to transport her to Melromark. Chapter 1, Philo's Friend. Chapter 1 continues from the prologue where the group have stopped to camp the night out, just like in the anime, but we get to see some time before the group falls asleep, where we see the young girls playing, and then Philo asks if they want to see her treasures. Of course, these treasures just being a few failed accessories of Naofumi's, some broken pieces of a sword, and a ball of something that came out of her mouth. After this, they follow the same scene from the anime where Naofumi and Raphtalia thought Philo may have ate the blue-haired royal girl. Chapter 2, The Fruits of Peddling. The first part of this chapter seemed to have been left out in the next part of the anime. The next morning, the group were the first to pass through the castle gates when they opened, and had to soon leave their carriage due to it being so difficult to maneuver through the roads. Naofumi decides the best place is the weapon shop to leave the carriage, so the group head there first. Once there, Naofumi begins his bargaining with the clerk and begins counting the profits from the past few weeks, approximately 50 gold coins. Here is when Philo asks to return Malty and the two leave after receiving his blessing. With their money and the equipment they lifted off the bandits, they were able to get a new magical sword with blood clean coating, magic armor, and an upgrade for his current barbarian armor using bones he's acquired. They were also able to acquire the info about the stars on their levels and how they needed to class up to continue leveling up and where they needed to go to have this performed. The group agreed to return later to receive their equipment, and both Naofumi and Raphtalia head to the church for the holy water. The following scenes played out the same way with their encounter with the priest at the church. Chapter 3, Everyone Loves Angels. Chapter 3 picks up the moment after the two leave the church after they're chased down by the young soldier. Naofumi didn't understand what it is he had done, but history has shown him that whenever soldiers chase him, he must run. His thoughts are immediately interrupted by Montayasu's ridiculous rantings over Philo, but unlike in the anime, he's speaking of the damn bird that keeps attacking him. He's been so traumatized he's installed a metal crotch protector to defend himself. He then switches topic to the young girl that Naofumi has enslaved, which absolutely confuses him. The only young girl he can possibly think of was Malty, and she certainly wasn't a slave. From here, Malty Heiress loses all grasp of reality as he begins ranting on and on about loving angels. Then before you know it, he was attacking Naofumi in the street, and things continue the same way we see in the anime before Malty shuts down the whole scene. The chapter closes out with Naofumi agreeing to talk to the princess and the young soldier who had finally caught up again. Chapter 4, The Volunteer. We continue where episode 9 ends, where the shield finally has a talk with the princess. In the anime, he immediately tells her that he wants nothing to do with her, but in the novel, Naofumi quickly thinks things over before dismissing her. The fact that she was Mine's younger sister and she was next to be the queen must mean that she was more of a master manipulator than Mine was. She's most probably after Philo, or worse, working with Malty Heiress to steal her. Has she coordinated the whole run-in just to get his trust? Is she even aware of all the nasty things her father and sister had done? All this backed his sudden decision to cut all ties with her. Episode 10 picks up from this scene where she's suddenly called away by a soldier. We then pick up from the anime where the young soldier requests to join his support party due to his actions at the village of Ryu. Just like in the anime, he pulls out an item of his yet to be sold and offers it to the group for 150 silver coin. Where we diverge though is the group comes back almost immediately with the funds. They explain that they went around the barracks asking everyone for money and they somehow made enough. Naofumi then reaches into his bag to give the group 5 pieces of equipment, including an accessory that absorbs up to a certain level of magic defensively that he created. He also gives the group all the money and explains he only asked them to get the money to test their sincerity and loyalty. He then set them to be a part of his party, but underneath himself and the girls, with the young soldier as the leader. From here, the group thanked the heroes and they set off to go get their class ups. Chapter 5, A Royal Order. The heroes head to the Dragon Hourglass to receive their class up, while en route, discuss their possible pathing. Raphtalia insists Naofumi should choose, and Naofumi tells her that after all is said and done, she needs to have a class that would be most beneficial to her after he leaves. Of course, this comes as a complete shock, but before they get deep into it, Naofumi switches to Philo to ask her the same question. Philo is insisting that she wants to spit poison, whatever the choice, and Naofumi is sure it's because of their run-in with the bioplants. They then arrive to the Dragon Hourglass and hear of the ridiculous pricing of 15 gold coins each, but soon agree, but then are immediately told that him nor his party are allowed to class up due to a royal order. The anime then switches to the group at the trader's tent, but in the novel, while the group are leaving, Naofumi racks his brain on how he can possibly class up his party, but then he remembers the slave has monsters that were clearly classed up at the tent. Chapter 6, Welcome. We rejoin the anime as the group head to the slaver's tent. The scenes at the tent are pretty much a one-for-one, with the only differences being how the conversation leading to weapons for Philo, and the fact that he offered multiple weapons for Philo, but they ultimately just settled for the claws due to how easily it would be for her to get in and out of them when she transforms. Naofumi then asks for the best pair that he has and is offered magic iron claws. With the new weapon for Philo, the two were excited to try them out and see the difference. They then are directed to the sewers by the slaver's apprentice and are told of a story of nobles raising a monster, but it becoming out of hand, so the quest being made to dispose of it. What we missed post-battle is the group returning to the tent so quickly that even the slaver was surprised and collecting a reward for the quest. With the reward, they had more than made up for the purchase of the claws, and before leaving, Naofumi asks about rules for turning in captured bandits for slavery, and informed that here in Melremark, that is against the law. After leaving the tent, the group revisits the weapon shop where the owner offers to build them a new carriage since their current one is in bad shape. Naofumi accepts, and in the meantime, before the carriage, the equipment, and the next wave comes, he decides to get back to his traveling merchant work. Chapter 7, General Commander. The next chapter is speed ran during episode 10. Naofumi reaches a town that appears to be in depression, where a guard ignores their traveling merchant pass and forces them to pay. Once inside, they find that everything is overpriced due to taxes. Naofumi splits from the greater group and goes to a bar where he finds the bow hero plotting with his group to overthrow some corrupt governor, and they quickly wrap things up and left. The next morning, he heard talks of a hero coming in the night and taking out the corrupt governor. He also finds Isuki in the middle of the road chatting up some beautiful damsel, and the idea that he purposely hides his capabilities and deeds in order to seem mysterious or cool irritates him. He quickly leaves the city. As the group continues their travels, they happen upon another town nearing the border, but the people here seem to be starving and desperate. He hears more about the coup that had happened nearby and what followed. At first, life had gotten better until the leaders of the same resistance that took out the corrupt leader went into power themselves and raised the taxes. Not because they themselves were corrupt, but because it was needed to acquire the funds needed to run the country. He makes a pot of food and feeds all the people there. The soaring prices of food and medicine were certainly good for his business, but he couldn't help ignore that Isuki was running around playing hero and not thinking about the effect it was having on the people he interfered with. Before leaving, Naofumi gave the leader one of his bio seeds. This greatly helped the country later. Chapter 8, Before the Storm. Chapter 8 seems to take a step back in the anime where Naofumi is helping Raphtalia apply the holy water drenched bandages to her wound. Just as in the anime, Philo quickly gets jealous and the two begin bickering about how close she is trying to get to a totally clueless Naofumi. Since it's been a day, they decide it's time they head back to Meromart and pick up the equipment from the dealer. After a couple more days, Raphtalia is fully healed from the meticulous holy water applications to the relief and surprise of Naofumi. They arrive to the shop the next morning and we rejoin the anime where Naofumi will receive his upgraded gear. As for the stats, it provided a boost in his defense, attack endurance, fire resistance, shadow resistance, HP restore, magic up, magic defense processing, and an automatic recovery function. Everyone of course loves his new upgrades, but he's more and more convinced that the dealer makes it this way to piss him off or to make fun of him. Once they part ways, since they have a bit more time, Naofumi offers to get them 2 new accessories. He figured Raphtalia was at the age she will want rings, necklaces, and earrings, but she only wanted a bangle with equip effects and Philo a hairpin that wouldn't pinch her when she transformed. He's both surprised and proud at their choices. Chapter 9, Framed Again. Framed Again goes back again to where Naofumi is accused of identity theft by Ren and Tsuki, but in the novel, it happens as they're leaving the weapon shop. Outside of the scenery, the scene plays out the same way where the bow accuses him first, with the addition of shield discrediting his claims at every turn. Ren, on the other hand, responded the same as in the anime. He took accountability for what he had done and even took additional reprimanding from Naofumi to the chin. Itsuki refused to believe Naofumi's lies and ultimately stomped off with Ren in tow. This chapter closes out with the same soldiers coming to find Naofumi again so they can talk game plan before the wave finally hits. They explained they couldn't get more supporters, but they still managed to come up with a solid plan for defending the upcoming wave based off what happened last time. Chapter 10, The Third Wave. This chapter begins the same way episode 11 begins in the anime. The group are making their final preparations before the wave. Naofumi finishes making the 2 new accessories, a jade bracelet for Raphtalia to balance the magic draw from her magic armor, and an amber hairpin for Philo with the enhanced agility up. Funny enough, here it makes reference to a filler episode of the anime where Philo and Raphtalia go on a quest to give Naofumi a gift. He mentions that he couldn't have made these items if the two hadn't saved up enough money in the hot spring town. If you know, you know. We also note that since the carriage that's being built isn't ready yet, they are currently using a luggage cart. And now the wave. While the beginning of the wave, many scenes remain the same or along the same pathing as the anime and novel. Right as the wave begins in the novel, Naofumi identifies Yasu and his group and instructs Philo to give them a good kicking, and as she's told, she removes the metal claws first. Following this, Naofumi somewhat orders the other heroes to focus on the cracks and boss while he protects the village. Of course, too arrogant to care, they agree, but quickly Naofumi realizes the other heroes don't have soldiers as companions as he does. He's confused because he figures there's no way they don't know about the game mechanics. Being that Naofumi is the only one with experience leading a guild and dealing with large-scale battles, he attempts to try to lead the heroes, but again the arrogance gets in the way, and he in the end relents and the other heroes scurry off to the deep cracks in the sky. The novel then resumes to the anime where the party and the soldiers defend the village against the monsters and evacuate the folks to safety. Other than the names of the monsters being mentioned, many of the scenes remain true. The chapter closes out with Naofumi's decision to join the other heroes and find out what's taken so long to defeat the boss. Chapter 11, Grow Up. Due to it taking way too long to end the wave, Naofumi decides to bring his party to the main fight and see what was the holdup. As we saw in the anime, as he arrived, he noticed a ghost ship floating in the air, and he also concludes Ren and Motoyasu are on board since he can see their skills flashing. He then notices Isuke shooting arrows at the ship with his party. He's insisting that the wave is just like the game he used to play, so he knows that they have to take out the ship to win. Clearly, if this is correct or not, currently it isn't very effective and they should instead be working together regardless of what the task is. Isuke is still treating all of this as some game and not really realizing the longer that they take to end the wave, the more people that are going to die. He grows tired of Isuke and sets off to board the ship. Philo leaps up high and uses an airstrike shield as a step to take another leap, reaching the ship. Once they do reach the ship, the scenes do remain true to the anime. Motoyasu and his party seem to be attacking the tentacles on one side of the ship, while Ren and his party are fighting the skeleton captain that heals when defeated on the other side. Naofumi analyzes the situation and tries to find a solution to defeating the wave. Once the Soul Eater is combined to a single being, the real battle begins, and the anime does well at adapting most of the scenes here. What is left out is how powerful the magic ball was. From just a singular hit, most of the heroes are left teetering, and even though Naofumi was able to defend against the blast, he's left in a lot of pain, but still on his feet. The monsters recognizes how effective this attack was, so he prepares for the next, and Philo, as we saw, jumps to defend. In the final scene of the chapter, Naofumi understands that though his chipping away strategy will eventually win the battle, the people simply did not have enough time. As we saw in the anime, he decides to unleash his Curse series shield, and it has received the upgrade due to the Dragon Core it absorbed. Curse series, Shield of Rage 2, Skill, Chain Shield Attack, and Iron Maiden. Special effect, Self-Burning. Naofumi then battles for control. Chapter 12, Iron Maiden. Red Dragon Flame, the Shield of Rage 2, had transformed Naofumi in itself into something entirely different. Every part of him was screaming in anger. This time he could barely deal with the shield's emotions, but from a touch from Raphtalia, he was able to keep his focus and fight. The fight for the most part remained the same, except we don't see how enraged Philo is. In this moment, though she was attacking the enemy boss, she would randomly attack other monsters in the area. When the monster attacked Naofumi, he took no damage, but in fact, since the new shield had self-burning, the monster was also taking damage from the flames, but it wasn't enough to finish him off. When the ship and the ghost turned their attention to him, the other heroes stepped in and they kept them off of him. He then focuses long enough to recall the second skill of the cursed shield and tries it out against the monster. We also see in the anime as Naofumi uses Iron Maiden to take down the enemy. Following the defeat of the monster is where the anime and novel take separate directions again. Immediately, Naofumi's SP meter drops to 0, and the Iron Maiden vanishes. Naofumi still has the Curse Shield equipped, and he tries to change it back to Chimera Viper Shield so that he can calm the rampaging Philo. Once finally powered down, Philo settles. Naofumi could then feel the glare of the other heroes as he looked to them, and they were complaining that Naofumi has been pretending to be weak and clueless. Suddenly, the group could feel an ominous feeling, and they hear the voice of a young lady in a kimono that we see in episode 11. She then sends an attack that kills another Soul Eater that was apparently sneaking up on them. The creature fell to the deck from one attack, and Naofumi immediately realized how out of the league she was. After Naofumi gives her his name, she immediately attacks him, but the heroes quickly counterattack. At that moment, she uses her technique, Circle Dan Zero, to take out the heroes in one hit. Luckily, Naofumi was able to jump to protect Raphtalia from the hit. Left standing was the Shield Heroes party, but through some quick thinking, Naofumi rummaged Mind's pockets and found the magic and soul healing water to replenish both his MP and SP. The next scenes are the biggest differences in the novel and anime. In the novel, Naofumi suggests to Glass that they should fight elsewhere since it was cramped and the other heroes would just get in the way. She immediately leads them to the ground off the ship. Once in a good spot, the fight continues and Glass continues with her fast, heavy attacks that Naofumi can just barely defend. If he had even a moment, he would heal, but even that he wasn't afforded. Once she realized her attacks weren't as effective on him, she switches her attention to his other two party members. But Naofumi then captures her in a shield prison that she quickly disposes of, but only to meet both Raphtalia and Philo immediately. The three work together flawlessly to attack, defend, and counterattack, so that even a more powerful enemy like Glass had a hard time landing anything decisive. We then see when Glass goes Naofumi to use his strongest attacks just as she did in the anime. Once she makes light work of the Iron Maiden, the countdown suddenly appears in Naofumi's view, but instead of jumping off the ship as he did in the anime, he instead takes off running with Raphtalia and Philo, and Glass immediately realizes they're attempting to survive the final seconds. She then heads to the rift to leave, and as we see in the anime, she leaves them with parting words that we see Naofumi ponders on following the wave. Chapter 13, Parting Ways. After the wave ends, Naofumi returns to a now down pirate ship where the unconscious heroes lay. He takes this time to absorb any leftover materials to continue building his shields tree. He unlocks some shadow resistances, his ability Second Shield from the Boss Soul Eater materials, special effect Soul Eat, and additional spirit resistances. After testing out his new ability, he finds out it is a combo ability used with the Airstrike shield that allows him to add an additional shield. Also, unlike in the anime, before returning to the castle, Naofumi and his party along with the soldiers went back to a nearby village to assist with the repairs and cleanup. And then a day later, the knights from the kingdom finally showed up to yell at Naofumi and his soldiers who accompanied him. After Naofumi points out that the other heroes that they love so much are hurt and unconscious, they order for them to be prioritized over even the hurt villagers for the good of the country. We then rejoin the anime where the volunteer soldiers plead with Naofumi to return with the knights to the castle as well. A day later, they arrive to the castle, and just before we see Naofumi stand before the king, he is told ahead of time that he would have to leave his companions in a separate room. Shortly after, the king makes his appearance, and we see the scene plays out where the king demands that Naofumi explain how and where he got so powerful, and Naofumi informs him that if he wants to know, he's going to have a grovel for it. This chapter concludes with Naofumi parroting and mocking the king until he finally throws him out, telling him to never return. Chapter 14, On the Road Again. We continue where we left off in the anime, where the king and Naofumi are still sending threats back and forth, and Naofumi concluding how easy it would be for him to storm the castle and kill the king anytime he wants. He defeated the same soul that even the other heroes can't. He stood toe-to-toe with the enemy that wiped out the heroes in just one attack. He said his final farewell, and then he leaves the castle. Their first stop was of course the weapon shop, so that Naofumi can go back to pick up the cart that was now complete. News clearly spreads quick through the kingdom because the shopkeeper soon brings up what happened at the castle. Though the conversation flows essentially the same way, some key differences is the keeper did not give them any of the new equipment or weapons. Raphtalia explicitly asks Naofumi not to buy her another sword since she still has her short sword, to which he agrees. As they leave the castle gates, they run into Mel for the second time since seeing the king, but this time she pleads with him to apologize, to which he responds to tell him that he can come kill him at any time. He then taps Philo and they dash out of there immediately. Chapter 15, The Shield Demon. Once they had gotten away, they had time to talk about Malty and her journey. Raphtalia feels that they at least owe it to her to hear her out, and he promises the next time he see her, he'll hear her out. Just in the back of the wagon, they notice a small bag with a note from the shopkeeper. Dear kid, I was too embarrassed to give you these directly. I went ahead and made you all the tools I thought would be helpful. Use them if you like. This small gesture touched Naofumi because it not only showed him how much he cared for them, but also how observant he was of them and their well-being to get them exactly what they needed. Inside, Raphtalia finds another sword similar to one that she broke. Then we saw the item that Naofumi fit over the jewel in his shield that could help them get more information out of the shield. After that, they find another short sword for Raphtalia, but this time a magic sword with no blade. Next, a strength glove that was meant for Naofumi, but he decides to give it to Philo instead. The next morning after breakfast, we see the scene from the final moments of episode 12, where Malty and a few soldiers find him again, and while in the midst of talking, the soldiers attack Malty and Naofumi defends her with an airstrike shield. The party then begins engaging with the knights, and after it was over, only a few managed to get away. At this point, Naofumi interrogates the original aggressor from the altercation. He finds out a few things. 1. The major religion of the kingdom, the Church of the Three Heroes, that only, of course, worships the other three heroes while crucifying the shield. 2. The knights that attacked Malty were the king's private knights. 3. They may have stepped into a royal dispute where Malty is the heiress to the throne over mine, so it's possible she's trying to take her out. And 4. Melromark is a matrilineal country where the queen holds more power over the king. During their talk, the soldiers begin to laugh and inform them whether the princess died or not, their job was still done. They realized the crystal ball that they saw earlier will work as a video recorder, and that was the point of the whole setup. Now, video evidence of his evil deeds will be broadcasted not only to this country, but to the next as well. This level of toxicity, of course, impresses Naofumi, but also meant he needed to decide what's next. Leave the princess, she'll likely be killed. Take the princess back to trash, there's no guarantee that they won't try to trap him. Or go back to the castle and just kill Trash. But this option had the highest possibility of failure. With all this new information, it was all starting to make more sense. Why he was treated so poorly when he first arrived, why no other adventurers wanted to team up with him, why everyone wanted to believe such a flimsy story of him. It's because the whole country has been raised on the foundation of hating the shield hero regardless. Now coming to a full understanding, he decides to go to Silvelt, since that country would most likely be the safest for them. With Malty back in tow, the party sets off towards Silvelt. Chapter 16, Appointment Arrangements. Only a few hours have passed since picking up the princess, and the party is already in hiding. The scenes from the chapter can be seen speed ran in the anime, where the group learns more and more of the gravity of the situation and the alteration of the footage. The news was spreading like wildfire, and they were finding it harder and harder to stay low. When Naofumi suggests they split up to be less conspicuous, Philo changed her form to look more like a normal Philolio. So that's how they traveled. Philo in her new form, Raphtalia with her torn up clothes and homely appearance, and Naofumi hiding in the back with Malty. Chapter 17, The Princess's True Strength. Only a few more days have passed on their travels, and they somehow managed to run into the same bandits as before. Not recognizing the cart, Philo, or Raphtalia, they are soon taught the same lesson again. During the exchange, Malty shows off her magical prowess as they face off against the bandits. Following the battle, the bandits who've already at least run into the party urges the rest to be open and honest unless they want the bird god to eat them. So, they led them to their hideout, and then they lost the hideout. The group stayed in the bandits' hideout overnight and then take the liberty to enjoy all of their food and valuables as well as their hospitality. We also find out here that Malty is a level 18 mid-level magic user that could use both water and magic. With this knowledge, Naofumi finally invites her to the party, and he spends the rest of the evening explaining everything that the king and mine has said and done to him. Once they finally reached the border, they found it lined with what looked to be a whole army guarding the checkpoints. While in hiding, they run into some villagers who claim since Naofumi gave them the miracle seed, they'll agree to help the heroes by switching carts and some worn clothes for the group. Just then, a soldier walks up to them asking if he's a merchant, but immediately recognizing it as the shield hero. Luckily, the soldier was one of the ones that joined him in the fight in the last wave. He informs them of the situation and that the other heroes are also searching, and the party decides to head south to hit the border of another country first to take a long detour to get to Silvelt. Chapter 18, Persuasion. As they are leaving is when it happens. One of the wizards that are chanting spells over all the carts passing quickly identifies their cart. Motoyasu and Itsuki immediately start rushing the cart when the party jumps out and Philo transforms back to her Philolio queen form. This is where we resume the anime from midway episode 13. At first, Malty tries to talk to the other heroes to try to defuse the situation, but talks break down once Mai steps in and lies about a brainwashing shield. Once Naofumi realized that no matter what they said, the result would still be the same: Malty dead, Mai next in line, and him being blamed for it all. He attempts to throw everyone on Philo's back and fly off, but as we see in the anime, Motoyasu produces some sort of black hoop and tosses it at Philo's legs. This causes her to crash and revert back to her human form. He explains that he had an alchemist make it to force Philo to stay in her angel form forever. When Malty shoots her aqua blade at Motoyasu, Philo manages to escape, but he instead grabs Malty and passes her to Mai. At this point, Naofumi does something that is completely left out of the anime and will probably never be mentioned. Naofumi then switches his shield to the Shield of Rage 2 and captures Motoyasu in his shield prison. Next, he activates the Bee Needle shield right before he yells Iron Maiden. Just as Motoyasu is going to be taken out by this attack, Ren and Ninsuki jump in, finally decisive of the evilness in Naofumi's heart, and destroy the Iron Maiden before it's too late. Now, Naofumi was face off against all the heroes in their parties, while Malty is captured and Raphtalia is busy trying to free Philo from the Black Hoop. Cornered, Philo suddenly bursts out that they won't catch her again, and from under her wings, she pulls out the power gloves that were gifted to her from the shop owner. She then puts them on and proceeds to pummel Motoyasu. By harnessing her power into the gloves, she somehow made magical claws appear from the ends. Quickly taking out Motoyasu, she manages to get to Malty before Mai could make her sniff some medicine. From there, it became a 2v2, Malty and Philo versus Motoyasu and Mai. The party members of the other heroes took this time to jump Naofumi, not knowing of his self-burning counterattack. After their companions were taken out, both the sword and bow heroes heal, then counterattack Naofumi, seemingly finding the weakness of his counterattacks, range attacks. Again, Naofumi tries to reason with the two, but Mai interrupts, announcing reinforcements have arrived and wouldn't allow any more talking. Soon, Mai and the reinforcements start chanting a group spell, Fireball, but instead of aiming it at Naofumi, they instead take aim at Malty. Just then, Raphtalia appears from behind, as in the anime, and stabs Mai with her actual sword. Chapter 19, The Tools. Stab. The spell fails and Mai is left staggering. Ren immediately jumps in and fights Raphtalia, while Mai is being healed. Since Raphtalia couldn't pull her sword back out of Mai, she draws her bladeless sword instead, and Ren immediately warns everyone of the dangers of a magic sword. In an instant, Raphtalia rushes him, and since his mind wasn't 100% into it, she manages to close the distance and strike him with the sword, causing him to pass out. She then turns her attention to Mai and effortlessly dodges her counterattack and lodges her magic sword into her chest. Taking this opportunity now that Mai was passed out, Raphtalia and Naofumi tries to reason again with Ren and Natsuki, while Naofumi is taking a rain of arrows from the enemy soldiers. One of the soldiers from the last wave that assisted Naofumi tried to speak up to stop the onslaught, but unlike when Naofumi was able to save Malty, this soldier was about to be stricken down when, just as we see in the anime, Naofumi's shield reacts to his extreme emotion and a blinding red light appears, and the broken shards from the item that he had received from the keeper seems to have shattered and attacks all nearby enemies. Though this stopped all the attacks, the group was still at a standstill surrounded by the enemy, until what seemed to be a bomb rolled in and Naofumi quickly defends his party from the explosion. But instead of an explosion, they instead receive a dark cloud. A voice then emerges from the smoke, beckoning the shield hero and his party, and they manage to get away. Chapter 20, Shadow. So there were a few differences between what we see in this chapter and what we see at the end of episode 13. First off, the voice that leads them through the smoke turns out to be the same individual that they ran into earlier when leaving the castle after getting into it with the king. We find out in the novel this individual was acting as a doppelganger for the queen at the time. Next, the individual seems to be a young woman in the anime, while in the novel, Naofumi refers to her as him, and he acts to be called Shadow. He isn't allowed to answer most of the questions that Naofumi asks, but what he was tasked to do is show the group where they can find the queen. And as soon as he asks, he then asks, "Will you go?" He also informs them that the Church of the Three Heroes has been weakened, and now is the best time for all of the heroes to work together to defeat them. He also lets them know that they're the reason behind the attempt on Malty's life, not the king. Against his best judgment, Naofumi chooses to believe him just this once since he saved his life and agrees to meet up with the queen. They share a few more words and then the shadow departs. After this, the group begins to settle in now that they know where they are going and what they're doing. Lastly, Naofumi uses a bit of lockpicking and magic to undo the hoop around Philo's egg. Epilogue. Name. Our epilogue of the story is how episode 13 ends after the shadow departs. It seems like everything that Naofumi says to Malty, he always adds a princess to it. Malty has picked up on this and it begins to upset her. She wants to be called by her name. Naofumi protests that she doesn't call him by his name, then remembers back to Mai never using his name, just calling him Shield Hero. She pleads and he relents and she is overjoyous. This also sparks Philo to also want to call him Naofumi, but after mispronouncing it and also not adding any honorifics, she settles on only calling him Master. With the world chasing them, nothing was better than moments like these when he's surrounded by the people he trusts and trust in him. And that will wrap up Volume 3 of the light novel. Apologies on so much time in between this one and the last one, but I promise you won't have to wait long for the next. Honestly, I had to take a cold hard look at things and realize way too many volumes are covered within just one season of the anime, so it might be a little bit crazy to expect me to shoot out another 10 volumes in the next 6 weeks. So I will go back to pacing, but I want to try to get these out on a more consistent schedule, maybe once to twice a month. So that means you all should be expecting Volume 4 of this light novel to be releasing sometime in December and maybe even Volume 5. But as for Volume 3 had the most differences between the anime and novel, so you probably want to stand by for Volume 4, which will cover episode 15 to 21 of the anime. Thank you all for sticking around to the end, and be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We love you all. Peace.